Hello, my name is Seviah. Some people know me by Gabriel. And am I pooping right now? No, I am not. But I am in a bathroom. This video is going to be to those around the world who have a desire to see a higher experience that is beyond comparing and contrasting, judging and analyzing. But this video will also be for those who wish to see conditions get better, who wish to see people forge common ground, for those who are wanting to see new ideas come into the fields, the institutions and industries that make up our society. But one thing I guess I will mention is I am in the bathroom because I'm able to block out certain sounds that are outside of this bathroom. So I'm going to shut my eyes and allow my spirit to say whatever it wants to say. I am the spirit, and I will defy the norms of what people think the spirit should do or say or think. It is my intention to see that people can experience a certain degree of wholeness beyond all the degrees that they might think define them, limit them, and judge them to a standard from which they can be considered to be right or wrong, good or bad, beautiful, ugly, intelligent, dumb, punishable, or deserving reward. I wish to say that what those people in this world who want to experience something more than the survival instincts, beyond the fight or flight instincts, beyond the ways of just getting along, of just getting by. This message will be to those people who want to see a breakthrough, who want to see that there is nothing wrong with what has happened or is happening or will happen. For everything that is happening is a result of the law of free will. It is the result of people desiring a certain experience. And as we can see in history, there have been many people to desire the experience of suffering, of some bad person that is inflicting upon them what they cannot transcend within themselves. It doesn't mean that people can't necessarily find a way to transcend. Let me re-put it this way. It doesn't mean that everyone has the ability to always transcend or overcome the physical circumstances that are around them. But this message is for those people who want to see another paradigm take hold in the world that is inside of you. And yes, there is a world inside of you that is just as complicated as the world outside of you. Because there is an interconnected, an intercorrelated system that allows both to be animated with its various complexities. This message is not for most people on planet Earth. This message is for those people who want to see that planet Earth can change when we can change ourselves. But even beyond this, that planet Earth can be recognized as a place that doesn't need to be changed in order for us to change, if that is what we desire, even though we cannot stop change every moment from happening to everyone, including ourselves. The biggest step for those people who are wanting better circumstances, better relationships, better, how shall I say, experiences that don't have to repeat the dramas, the squabbles, the petty infighting between friends, family, coworkers, customers, other community members, and other, perhaps, cosmopolitans that in this age are able to tour and visit and explore for a variety of different countries as the technology is now available. Why does he have his eyes closed? What matters is what comes out of the open mouth. And what I, the Spirit, wish to speak is that it may not seem logical, that there is a definite way that can overcome the many limitations, the many hurdles, the many seemingly brutal interests that do not want anyone, except for a select few, to have the privilege to live prosperly, abundantly, and with high regard. There is a force inside that wishes to say there is a force outside that is corresponding to our perception. And what is the perception of those of us who have the potential to see that the world is a product of our inner world? But not just us as an individual, but also as a collective. What can be done to allow our life to be better, to allow the life of the world to be better? What can be done? Well, why are conditions worse? Why is life worse or less than? And there are a variety of different ways of addressing this, but the most important one is that people have tried to express there is an ultimate way to express truth, freedom, love, or any other quality that corresponds to those who have tried to say that their system is the best system. And that if others do not conform to that system, they will have to face the consequences that will be brutal, they say. When in fact, they are just talking about themselves without knowing it. The important thing that people consider is that the world is the way it is because there have been many people thinking the world should be a different way. And if people don't accept the way they think it should be, then they are justified in using force to make those people conform to the way they think the world should be. You have various religions, you have various theories, various ideologies, various forms that, how shall I say, reinforce this sense of superiority. And even I have had this superiority, and still do to some degree. By thinking suffering is wrong and should not exist, when in fact it is a result of the free will of people to see what it is like to try to make others believe what they believe, no matter how benign. But now we come to a threshold. Do we just think kind thoughts? Do we just share kind words? Do we just live in a very privatized way? Not challenging, not exposing the different forces that do not want people to see the force that allows us to stand for the whole of humanity by recognizing that whole is not outside of us, in some country, in some nation, in some village, city, or town, in some household that we have grown up in. The factor that is hard to detect is how we can express ourselves in all the different ways that allow us to see there is a way to express without trying to put down anyone or suggest that there is a way that is the ultimate way. Now, these are very simple words, and the world is built on many technological words, very sophisticated and advanced terms, ideas, instruments, devices, grades, and fields that require certain advanced levels of study. But there is a large portion of all of it that gets cut from the line of accuracy, from the line of helping people see what is stopping us from working more closely together. And what is stopping a lot of people from working together? Well, there are a variety of ideas, of identifications, of experiences. And one of them is the idea that suffering should not exist. War, poverty, disease, environmental disasters, various forms of crime, various forms of abuse, various forms of hatred. But these are all mechanisms, outpicturings of people with a certain state of consciousness who are choosing to use these experiences to see what their state of consciousness is like. Now, it seems like I just did a simplistic circling of what I just said before. But the central point of the circle ignites a threshold that creates a new level of understanding that even goes beyond understanding. And this level recognizes that you and I have the right to say we do not accept the tactics of division in ourself, the tactics that are constantly wanting to blame other people for our own experience, but also wanting to neglect how there is a select few who are doing everything they can to make it seem like they are innocent, and that there is nothing that we, the people, can do inside of our own self to shift the equation so that poverty, war, disease, other forms of disasters, crimes do not have to exist. So there are two sides to the coin. And one side acknowledges that there is so much that has happened, even beyond the records of known history, which you have various people throughout time claiming that there is something that happened to the entire earth, or to most portions of the earth, some thousands of years ago. But the point of this side of the coin recognizes that there has been a huge amount of resistance to acknowledge that the conditions that are found is a result of people thinking those conditions should not be there as a learning instrument for people to see their own self or their own self-centeredness. But the other side of the coin recognizes that it can take a long time for things to get better, way beyond our own generation. Even though we have technology, we have the internet, various inventions, nuclear power, all sorts of types of transportation. And yet, there still seems to be a social conformity to hiding the idea that we all have the right to claim the earth as ours, to claim the resources as ours, to claim the wealth and the work to a, how shall we say, a fair distribution of what value it has. And a lot of the businesses and transactions of this world do not have a fair appropriation of what we call currency. And many people have begun to research why currency has become so devalued, even though for more modern nations, the currency isn't completely out of touch with reality, as many goods and services are all right. There's inflation. But the point is, there is something in us that can shift the equation when we can say, we do not accept the idea that a small group of people throughout time have allowed us to believe that there is only a small percentage of people that are deserving the majority of the resources that are extracted. And in today's time, it is a little different, but still, what people do not have to accept is how a small group of people throughout time have twisted ideas in religion, in science, and of course in all other areas, to make it seem that our mind does not affect matter, that our mind and our thoughts and our emotions, our sense of self, does not affect the entire world every moment by our will to see how it is all interconnected. How is it all interconnected? Well, this is a point that other people besides Seviah will and are contributing to in the more scientific fields. But everyone has a certain sense of humanity, a certain sense that we, the people, should not hurt each other, should not put down each other, should not remove each other from the capacity to receive what is rightfully ours. And there have been a variety of people throughout time to suggest to the many that the only way in which to live successfully, happily, and in truth, in honor, in humility, is by following the rules, following the doctrines, following the careful guidelines for what makes a credible theory or hypothesis. There have been people to try to do everything they can to stop the average person from recognizing, even if they are in a bathroom, with a saw blade coming from a sound blade motion that is very distracting, to make him think that he still cannot shift his own mind to a state that sees there can be an experience of joy if we can allow our understanding to be infused with the will to surrender an ultimate system and consider what many people have said, although suppressed and censored sometimes, or having their words twisted, that energy and consciousness and the spirit are one, united essence that drives all life in the universe, molecular, celestial, interplanetary, often which is not noticeable by the physical eye or even by the physical instruments that all life and all beings, including on earth, have the ability to say, there is a different life we can live if we would just let go of trying to control our own life. So other people can conform to our belief system, while having the courage to say something about the idolatry, the blind ignorance of those who do not want to recognize the average person to having the entire universe embedded within their own psyche, and that the story of humanity is really the story about ourselves. And there is a bigger picture that Seviah cannot fully share about the stars and the molecules and all the different intricacies that go into making the kingdoms or the levels of intelligence, such as the mineral, the plant, the animal, the human, crossing over into another level, the self-realized human, in which there is another level and another level that even goes beyond this planet. But institutions have largely co-opted a special interest to stop people from recognizing that we have the will to say we do not accept this sense of idolatry, be it from religions, trying to make some saint or prophet, some Messiah, Buddha figure, to this exception, to this almighty, divine state that is unattainable through our own minds. But even to say that this state of grandiose, sophistication, comprehension, illumination that these beings attain to was not exactly, and often mostly, is blurred from the real record that these beings lived lives like many of us, not knowing how we can shift the equation without really pushing people to consider how there is an elite that is wanting to stop us from recognizing that conditions can change when we can change our conditions for what we can and cannot express that is deemed worthy by the select few. And this does offend many people, and will continue to offend many people. For anyone who dares to say how the tactics of the elite work, but also in equal proportion how the tactics of the ego work, for they work side by side, and one force is inside and the other is outside. But if you take another step higher, you see they are neither outside or inside. For you see that there is no contrast, because any contrast is a construction of a concept, of an idea, onto that which doesn't have form. How could you say the elite and the ego doesn't have form? In its essence, the energy that animates the form is even more than what anyone or I could say. Even though I just called it energy, that is a veil to what the actual force is. As the word force is another veil to what the actual thing is. As the word thing is another veil to what the such and such is, etc., etc. So I was just speaking to you in the silence. Did you hear what I just told you? And you don't even have to call it me. That was the one speaking. But it doesn't matter because we're all one. And what experience humanity is being encouraged to consider is how the dynamic on Earth cannot ultimately be defined. Then what do? Do we just sit here and allow our bodies to rot? Because we do have to define certain conditions, define certain work, define certain models so that we can distribute the resources correctly, how we can dissect and treat certain people correctly, how we can trade and negotiate with people correctly. There has to be some foundation. And that is correct. There does and there is a foundation. Especially in our modern times, with a new approach to cooperating despite the very many differences of language and culture. And so this foundation is important in equal proportion to what upholds the foundation. For there is a foundation that upholds the foundation. But that is something we can only speak about if we are willing to consider that we cannot ultimately define what we are speaking about. And this gives us room for playfulness. It gives us room for imagination, intuition. It gives us room to consider that this room that you are hearing this voice in is more than just a room. What then would it be? What is that force that wants it to be a certain thing? It is what I could define by calling it certain names, calling out its various patterns. But ultimately, who will call out that which doesn't want us to unite under the principle of unconditional love? And that may sound like a complete abstraction from the topic that was being spoken of. But there is interconnection between the topics. And love is not just a gentle force. It is a force that will call out the tactics of that force that does not want to be acknowledged as trying so hard to stop people from seeing themselves as the instrument for a huge symphony of a variety of participants that are trying to assist in our recognition that the world is a reflection But how do we talk in terms of living and surviving and overcoming corruption and overcoming all the discordant and divisive cultures that are seeding into daily life, institutions, modern entertainment, high positions, high places? How does this all relate? Well, what relates to life is love. The love to allow life to be, and the love to allow life to be more. And how can we allow life to be more? We can offer a different idea that suggests we can take charge, we can take initiative, we can become the leaders. If we would stop projecting other leaders as the ultimate problem, while still holding accountability from a different paradigm, not one of which wants to punish and make one feel bad and humiliated and guilty, but one in which offers the reasoning for why some of us go so far down as we wish to at times destroy the entire race, the entire planet. For even these beings deserve to hear how they can go beyond what they have heard from their mind, telling them that they should be the creator of the system, of the rules, of the laws, because Why not? The Creator has created all of this. If the Creator is so vast, why can't I be so vast in creating my own world the way I want? And so, certain beings were given the opportunity to experience what that consciousness was and is like. But many of them may very well deny the will to consider another approach to life, which is why in our criminal justice system there should be certain measures in place to restrict people from harming others. But the true harm is not what others do to you, but it is what you think others should do for you. Rather than considering how there perhaps is no other. Than what you perceive about yourself, being one with all others. And this goes into a much bigger idea that in essence is not an idea, but this is part of the play where we go and discover the different realities that cross over each other. Although I have complete respect for the free will of the people to say, no, you are wrong, you are disillusioned, you need help. And I could say, I do need help, but I know the best help that I can get is that help that I wish to give. That help that is based on a different way of expressing to others, that opens the door to a new religion that doesn't have a system where if you don't obey, you will not be allowed into the prosperity that is our birthright, which some people call heaven or believe is somewhere else. But they will find out at the time in which they are ready to stand outside of that experience they have been having, thinking that it is not within them, that the kingdom is not within them, that heaven is not within them. But to get there is a journey that cannot be forced by anyone, not even your own self. For any force creates a counterforce. So what then do? We allow ourselves to be consumed by the infinite you, the infinite I, that dances and sings the song of the heart that wants to say, welcome to the new day. The day that calls for us to see that there is nothing that can stop us from recognizing that we are a united being, that we are a being that cannot be suppressed unless we choose to think that we need to be suppressed. Then we will be given that right to experience that. But what is perhaps one of the concluding elements of this message is that we can have better conditions, better circumstances, better experiences if we would just reach into our mind and see that force, that form that wants to compare that which is better to that which is worse, in which others should be put into a position that they obey what you think should be better or worse. And then allow for the ignition to spiral yourself to the new summit horizon that breaks the dawn and allows for your betterment to take hold as you wish to release that hold and give whatever it is that you have been holding to those who are wishing for someone to say that everything can and will be changed. The elite, the inequality, the corruption, the hate, the disease, the war, the starvation, the disabilities, the deformations, the illnesses, all the things will change when we can be the instrument for the change that does not accept what has caused so many people to believe that they cannot be the ones that say no to that system that denies their spirit the right to be the light from which can be released the exposure of those who do not want to be exposed. And that within that does not want to be exposed. And that is a grand journey that we are all on together. And I hope I have given you some sparks along the way to feed our hunger to a system, to a world, to a life that seems so devoid of a new spark, an all spark, a spirit spark that unites the whole cosmos every moment as we wish to see the entire cosmos in each moment, through each and every form that is, in essence, beyond form.